from Steve, who said, motivation has taken a hit, but didn't T&E's video come off just sounding a bit Stockholm Syndrome?
Yes.
In what way? Or do you mean that in the way of like, they're like, I really want to play, but where's my motivation gone? I didn't, to be clear, I've not watched that video. I think you have, though.
I have. They sparked the conversation last week with motivation being gone. So it did sound like Stockholm Syndrome, with the definition of that in this case being tied to extrinsic motivation, which is basically the game was really rewarding and it forced you to play because you really wanted the player power because that's how you play the game.
Oh, I understand.
And you really wanted all of these things, and the game was like, right, well, you have to log in X times a week, you have to log in and do this, you have to go and do your Torghast. And everyone went, no, I hate this, but people still played. So you take away that part, and they're like, why do I not play anymore? And the answer is you played because you felt forced to. That's why you played. And maybe there was an element of fun in that.
Because that force to a lot of people is just going to be motivation because they're like, well, I have a thing to chase.
Yeah.
So it's not really force.
Mm-hmm. It's heavily incentivized.
Yeah, it's just that, like, are you playing it for its... Well, that's the thing. It's like, are you playing it for its own reasons? But that is the reason. Because this is an MMO. It's about collecting power and collecting things in my account and getting more.
Yeah, it's the...
Versus living out an experience in a secondary world, which I guess is the part of MMOs and really the part of so many games that no longer is the thing that, like, we focus on. Because, like, design's totally not focused around that anymore. It's focused around, like, things to do.
Yep.
I guess then it's interesting that... I suppose for them, it's like it had to be player power. Because clearly getting, more woolly hats from the Tuskar or, more dragon riding customizations, that clearly didn't do it.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Where it's like, well, you're playing the game to feel rewarded because it was rewarding you, but it was rewarding you in... Some might consider it like... Because obviously Stockholm Syndrome is like people... it's coined from when you're kept captive of someone and you start to empathize and in some cases fall for your captor. And it's a horrible thing, but it's like a whole sense of like how the internal logic of the human brain works under duress and under circumstances like that and stuff like that. You kind of just end up, your psychology warps. And it is like, it was considered somewhat abusive, Torghast and artifact power and Azrai power and the constant grinding you had to do to stay in the loop. And that's kind of it, where that kept people captive in a way. In a lot of cases where if you stop playing for 2 weeks, you're behind. So you never stop playing for 2 weeks. So you always have the habit built. But now you're like, well, you kind of forget, well, why was I playing this in the first place? In a sense, it's not that insane. So like, obviously, like you could say, well, you take leveling out of Diablo, how many people will still play it? You take power going point progression out of Diablo and you go, well, how many people keep playing it?
Things. Yeah.
And then you go, well, that's kind of part of the game. And that's the problem where WoW for so long, that was part of the game. That was part of the game, bunch of ways. And like gearing, people, no one will say gearing is like Stockholm Syndrome or toxic abuse or anything. Because that's like clearly the game. It was the additional stuff. It was additional stuff on top.
It's what's really bloody interesting. Because like the whole, what do we do? Character's done. I don't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
That happened in WoD. It kind of hurt WoD a lot. Which
is fascinating because I loved WoD for that reason.
And ever since after that, up until Dragonflight, there's been a thing to chase. I mean, a bit less so with Shadowlands because it didn't have AP in a way that was like tied to your power. I suppose, yeah, it is one of those interesting things. It's like, the problem, right, because there are like some design benefits that you get from something like artifact power, but then you get a design problem that the Diablo 4 developers recently ran into. Of course, in that game, it's just leveling up, because as you level up, you get more points for your Paragon board, and your Paragon board is a very large source of player power. So they had the problem where people will just turbo grind the most efficient dungeon that they can do. So then you get the Maw of Souls 3 chest run problem all over again, or THD doing island expeditions for 8 hours straight in a single character.
Jesus.
Which for a lot of people ends up being a little bit game ruining. But then you do sort of look at the ARPG genre, and it's a bit weird because everyone's doing that all the time. And perhaps then the difference with the ARPG genre is it feels faster and like less capped. Whereas in an MMO, there's this like level of social harmony and balance that they feel they've really got to maintain. So players like they can't get too far away from each other. So then you end up having a lot of rubber banding going on. Because in every iteration of AP, you were rubber banded back towards where the cutting edge players were. Yeah. And then cutting edge players were always rubber banded backwards because of the exponential requirement increases for the next level that was then paired with, in an exponential fashion, the amount of AP that you get every week also like increased, which basically meant you were never punished heavily for falling behind, but you also weren't really that well rewarded for getting ahead. Yeah. So they kind of ended up having this odd situation where they had like well-intentioned catch-up, but combined with a sort of like a few different perverse incentives at the very top end that I think ended up just burning people out. So it's like, is there a way where AP could be done again? It's quite tricky within the idea of an MMO because like in Diablo, they don't give a shit if you just level up way faster than anyone else. That's fine. They don't care. Whereas in WoW, like, they're not going to let that happen.
Well, they actually ran into issues with Diablo Immortal, didn't they?
Yeah,
because it was more MMO-y. It was more of the, like, the Lost Ark inspired kind of stuff, where it's like where everyone has to kind of go in the same pipeline because we're MMOifying this, and we need you to not get too far ahead because we need everyone in the same kind of category, and we need people to, like, see people who are slightly ahead and go, oh, I can catch them. Yeah. I can catch them. You don't want people to go, well, I will join and play your game now. How many hours do I have to grind? No, I will not play your game now. Go fuck yourself. And that's the problem. They're like really worried about that. I think a lot of the case, but I guess the major thing with why do you not want to play? And the answer is because you're done. AP was you're never really done. And that's even more obvious than ever in 7.3 with Legion Fall. Concordance of the Legion Fall, I should say, where it's like, hey, do you want to infinitely grind out a buff that gives you more main stat? And just to say that was in World of Warcraft sounds completely insane, because it was, and it was actually pretty cool. But it came with all the downsides. That was like I was talking a little bit earlier, but how like the end of an expansion is the best time to play, because they'd ironed out most of the gripes with artifact power by that point. So you logged in, started a new character, you did one quest, and your artifact weapon exploded. Yep. And you got Legion Fall in like at 2 hours of playing.
Or it's like BFA. If it's BFA, you're this absurdly glimmery holy paladin. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny the way all those things have worked out. Yeah.
So Red Shanks is saying, are people arguing about bringing back mandatory grinds, LMFAO? I think there's only one person arguing for that, and that's THD, and that person very much knows what they want. So, you know, if you're gonna fight for your own incentives, fair enough. No matter how no matter how dangerous it is for the population of the video game at large, definitely onto something. No one's arguing for it, but the point is that people are very much feeding the lack of a mandatory grind and this is a really weird experience. And you get this with a lot of extrinsically motivating games. You get it with video games where you finish getting all the trophies. You get it with video games that you've finished and want to play, but there's no avenue to play. And it's the idea of you're done. There's nothing for you to do that fits your like criteria of what is things to do. There's nothing you want to do. You want to play the game in some capacity. Maybe with World of Warcraft, it's because your identity is tied to the game. Because you're a World of Warcraft player, so you play it, and you play it like every day, or you play it a couple of days a week. And you're like, well, what do I do if I have no World of Warcraft to play? Shit. But my identity in my life is playing this game. But I don't want to. Oh God, that feels wrong. And that's like the problem with all of those. We're like, you're done. You can go do other things. But some people want to play the game. But they want to play the game. They don't want to play the game to just piss about and like, it's the whole laps around Dalaran thing, right?
Yeah.
Where you do laps around Dalaran when there's no content.
And that's the problem. I know what your version of laps is. It's leveling. Because you'd always, I would like come into work and you'd be like, for fuck's sake, I just leveled for 4 hours last night. Why did I do this?
I've gotten much better at not doing that.
Yeah, you've been very strong.
This plus 50% XP buff's been rough for me.
I felt that.
Yeah.
It's like I've been leveling up my paladins, now level 61. And if I've like from level 40 or something, it felt fucking great.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made me realize, and I know people will laugh, but it made me realize if I kept on getting XP at endgame, shit would feel good.
Yep.
Because imagine doing the Blue Flight quest line, but it gives you like 2 levels worth of XP, and Blizzard do a thing that's just like, hey, guess what? You see when a new campaign thing comes out or a new whatever, this is a syringe of high glucose corn syrup straight into your fucking liver. And that's just what they do. So then someone's like, oh, great, I got 2 levels. Now, of course, you're probably then saying, but I'm a max level. How do I get levels? You don't make any sense. Ah, wait.
Paragon levels.
Paragon levels. Guild Wars 2, Masteries. In Guild Wars 2, you keep on leveling. And when you level up, a box of J's explodes in your screen. You're like, I've got some rewards. Woohoo!
Overwatch 1 was perfect for it.
Overwatch 1 did that.
People loved getting levels because you got a loot box. And you also got a little bit of prestige from, hey, you've got a level. And then there's prestige leveling. You're not going to get prestige. You know, obviously, that was... I don't know where the first version came from, but the first version of prestige leveling people would have encountered.
Champion points, apparently, in ESO. And the thing is, like, maybe with some of that stuff in the way that you have some account-wide progression in seasons for D4, maybe there's, like, a little bit of account-wide progression, like, within an expansion or something that Blizzard could do. Like, again, in Guild Wars 2, they just know, like, we can add new masteries in a new expansion. That ties into our leveling system, and it's evergreen. Right? So it's like they give you a turtle mount. Oh, the turtle mount comes with all of its different masteries. It just makes sense. So with WoW, it's like if you make masteries, then you actually have a system in an evergreen fashion you can hook all that shit into. And then even just for like a regular player who doesn't care about raiding, Blue Flight questline comes out, they're like, oh, so you're telling me this questline's like really good, really fun, really good content. Also, I'm going to get a big old surge of XP, and I'm going to get some masteries. Oh, this is exciting. And now they have a mixture of a like, a very literal, like, I want to play this to get the reward, but then that actually gets them in the door to play the content. As an example,
exactly it.
yeah,
Exactly.
because you look at a lot of the narrative content in this expansion that's been behind the renounce. And it's like, I know they come with a fair stack of rep, but they're not that rewarding.
It's not super apparent.
And yeah, it's like they're not that rewarding. It's also, as you said, not particularly apparent. So it's like, yeah, why not do that? And actually, there are I do have 2 super chats to do that are very, they're actually Guild Wars 2-ish. Like Dark Soul 9669 saying they need to take more notes from the Guild Wars 2 events. Something relevant is always up that's working towards your chase items and legendaries. Yep. And that's the thing, Guild Wars 2, that is a game that you can play in circles. And you can just go around and around and around and around map meta. Yeah, you've got like things that are going on a very like server time thing, like boss spawns, but then it's like you can just hop into a map that's like whatever map you want, and you can just grind out the shit in that map and keep on going with the way that their events work. It's like that's a fairly wise way to do it. And Dark Soul also said like Guild Wars 2 doesn't even give power for that stuff. Spirit shards for levels at max are a major material for legendaries, which are cosmetic and convenience, not power. So yeah, there's a lot of lessons still to learn from Guild Wars 2, and especially with Guild Wars 2 actually being a bit more competitive in the marketplace, because they've got a new expansion coming out soon. Yep. And they just had an expansion like a year and a bit ago. So basically Guild Wars 2, instead of being on like a 4-year expansion cycle, it's now on a 2-year expansion cycle. It seems that ArenaNet have like really just doubled down on the game. So I think all that stuff, it's like Blizzard's got the resources.
It's
away you go.
It's just, and this is going to be interesting because this is definitely, we've talked about things we expected to see be expansion level features, and then they're not expansion level features, and they're just dropped in the middle of a patch in Dragonflight because we live in that world now, which is fantastic. But this is definitely this is like an expansion defining feature. That's like, hey, we're going to go back and fix World of Warcraft's long-term motivation problem by giving you a big list of things to do forever. And obviously, even the Traders Tender is a good example there. Because someone there a little while back said, imagine if like Paragon boxes or like level up to get tendies. And you go, well, that's perfect, except tendies are specifically designed to not eat into too much of your time and make you feel like you should play forever. Because they've been very careful with like your time, which is really wild. And it's like they need to be a little bit less careful about that in very controlled ways. Which is like, they'll learn that eventually. That like, I mean, we're talking about it, which means they're probably talking about it. They like... There's a couple things of I can't remember who it was. I think it was an interview, the Wowcast, I think, where it was something either Graham or Steven said, and I was like, oh, that is. They've
My
just
bladder
like
is weak.
yeah, they've just like implicitly made us super aware that they completely are into what the community are talking about. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was some like community fear about the dungeon or something.
Ian talked about like watching community podcasts and stuff.
Yeah, it's like
specifically like healers saying we're too strong.
yeah, so they're very good at like actually figuring out that stuff's going on. They're definitely in touch. They're listening to people. So like, maybe not us, but like even like that Telias Avadil video, they will know that people are going, well, why is, because they'll see the internal metrics too. They'll see, hey, numbers are slightly down for playtime. Why is that? Oh, well, maybe people aren't being rewarded. And there's a little bit of the other stuff of like the rewarding, like they clearly have issues with rewards. And time rifts are a good version of that being rewarded. Zarla Cavern's not being rewarding. They'll know all that from the details. They'll see people talking about that. So I think it's up for them to like solve that problem and deliver something, which I think is entirely feasible and practical. I imagine it wouldn't even be all that like hard. And yeah, Night Stalker would be Nightmare of Power Book on boxes. Give that's the problem they have to deal with, where they need to figure out a way to give people something to do. And that's where the time rifts are good. The time rifts are a pretty good version of that, but they're contained into patch content. So it's all about how do they make that like a full like expansion defining, you go do this for a couple hours. There's something to always log in to do. That's ultimately the problem, because it has to feel optional but also feel rewarding. Because it was the way Michael said something there, which I think is interesting. He said people need to get in the door to do content. And that's something I'm sure, like maybe if you've felt the same thing, like let me know. But I definitely have this issue where I really enjoy playing video games, but sometimes I don't really have the motivation to say go back and play a game I haven't touched in a while or something. But there's something that I did recently, which was I started to play Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin again. And there were two reasons I played Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin again. Well, three, sorry. One was because someone else was playing it. And for those who aren't familiar, it's very like Neo 2. It's an insane game. The reason I haven't played it is because I finished all the story stuff. And I went, well, I'm a story player. I'm a novelty player. I love the action combat. And I played it on hard. Great. But doing this again with the end gear loop of chaos levels, which is like it's chaos, go up to item level 200 and then progress marginally up to 300. That doesn't really, I don't care about that, repeating the same thing. But then I realized there's like, I hadn't got the platinum trophy. And this is the fun thing where I like doing that for games. A little, hey, I've played everything the way the developers have expected me to play. And the things that was missing there was like complete every side mission. I went, oh, I haven't done all the side missions. Oh, there are hidden side missions I didn't know about. Okay. So I started to hunt those down. And then I bought the season pass as well, because they have like story DLC. And I went, fuck, I'll do the story DLC. But it was like, I love playing that game. But what kicked me in the door to play the game was having that push of extrinsic motivation, which is probably a bad thing. In the complete pure motivation, you should only do things for intrinsic reasons. That's like the utopian version. But that's clearly not how the real world works. Because you're like, oh, I love my job, but would you do it if you don't get paid? And the answer is, well, probably not, to be honest, for most people. So that's like a thing that you kind of have to be, like sure of. Yeah. And that's where World of Warcraft does need to reward people in those ways. That's more than I said.
And ultimately the rest of the market, like that's the tricky thing.
They know that, like,
even if it's like, right, let's just say you are the mobile game with many waifus. The rest, and now imagine the rest of the market's doing gacha. And you might get like some people with the marketing point, we don't have gacha. But the problem is that whole audience has been trained to go in a big gacha circle. Yeah. So if you take the gacha circle away from them, they're like, oh, but I play gacha games. I can't play this game anymore. You know, it's like, I'm sure there's some people, they used to love Counter-Strike back in the day just for the sake of playing CS and getting better. And, maybe then they got really into the skins and all of that. And then maybe they start playing some other progression-based games. And then they go back to Counter-Strike and they're like, wait, why did I play this again? And it's like, yeah, because it was fun.
Yep. Fun doesn't work.
Yeah, do you remember, like, motherfuckers we used to go CSGO surfing. Counter-Strike surfing. I would just go home and be like, I'm just going to go into a surf map and do cool tricks for like an hour and a half. And it's like nowadays, that's so unthinkable.
Yeah, there was
bad.
There was a period of time, and it basically embarrasses me how long it was ago. It might have been like a year or two ago, maybe a year and a half. I remember I just like, apropos of nothing, I just played Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 for like 4 or 5 hours on like some Saturday. What was I doing in it? I was just flying around maps doing stuff. And it was like self-directed. It's like, what can I do here? What can I do here? What kind of fun can I have? And then I went, oh my God, I just played a video game for pure fun.
Yeah.
There was no other reason.
You're just like, what? This isn't what we do anymore.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing. Well, that is a very good comment. Thank you very much, Bobby. Bobby Brankovic says, that's what's beautiful about fighting games. We don't need the progression systems or the secret missions or whatever else. But what do all fighting games have? A ranked mode.
It's a mastery loop, yeah.
What happens when you play fighting games and get slightly better? Well, your point is you're playing to get better. Why do you lab to get better? You're motivated. It's just not by game systems. You're motivated by natural human systems, which is to improve, to get better. It's why League of Legends, Valorant, CSGO, they're all really compelling. But CSGO is obviously like, a lot of people play that for fun. Obviously, people play like bunny hopping stuff. But the point is people play for like rank. People play for that mastery, for that sense of, for the sense of personal progression. As opposed to, I guess we're just going to, I'm going to do this you're going to do it for inside your brain numbers instead of outside your brain numbers. That's basically the difference, which is the crazy thing about that is literally, it's all this like grand, weird scheme about, it is just an intrinsic, extrinsic motivation discussion, shut up, because that's all video games really boil down to, especially now. I think that's one of the big things of like, there's different flavors to it. But you look at Vampire Survivors as the big new thing of, that was about, please tell me that was only a year ago and not 2 years ago. Anyway, please don't say 3. Anyway, the reason that is there is because it is just we're really getting into like the wirehead version of how to talk about anything, and you go, well, why do you play video games? Well, it's all dopaminergic chemistry. It's all your neurochemistry, and that's what it boils down to, because we're getting too fucking smart.
So that's the problem. It's like, you get so smart, then you play the clip of DJ Khaled, like, congratulations, you played yourself.
Yeah, so
you're like, shit, I have thought myself into being sad. Great. Yeah. Why do I have thoughts again? How do they help?
It's all what lights and sounds and numbers going up make dopamine reactions in your brain, and that's where obviously like Vampire Survivors was very good at that. Dave the Diver recently is a very fun video game, exploding the player count.
Let me be free. BattleBit.
I'm not actually sure about BattleBit because I don't know what
it does have some
systems
progression in it.
Yeah,
like kill dudes, level up, get guns.
Yeah, which is obviously gun games, a brilliant thing for that example. The old example of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, what progression did it have? You leveled up and you got new guns, and it tutorialized your guns by giving you like them at the right time for them to learn new concepts and stuff like that. But for Dave the Diver, it's like, what's the good part of that? Obviously, it's a roguelike, and it's got multiple forms of progression that all tie into each other. So it's all numbers go up all day long. It's just brain firing on all cylinders the whole time, the whole way. And that's the stuff that's really like kind of, that's what works for a lot of those. Work for Vampire Survivors, works for like crazy stuff. It's the whole thing around battle passes and season passes now. It's all the hook into progression systems, because World of Warcraft, because playing video games is just trying to replace the fact that you can't do anything meaningful in life anymore. Well, without a great amount of effort, let's say. Not to get too modern philosophical on you. But ultimately, that's the thing. Where like, what's the big thing World of Warcraft was good for? You leveled up, you felt good, you had a part in the world.
You did.
Now you don't have much of a part in the world anymore, unless you're like a crafter and your part in the world is exploitation. But I have opinions anyway. It's like, that's the thing World of Warcraft was very good at to begin with.
That's it. Mad as the World of Warcraft commie. Total WoW commie. Get no.
I don't know about the free market without restrictions as far as crafting goes, but let's leave it at
Red equals dead.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like the whole thing is, it's a race to the bottom for motivation to get people to play video games, and Gacha is one of the most insane for it, because it's, do you like online shopping? Do you like random variable reward ratios and schedules? Do you also like, I'm not even going to be apologetic, do you also like being an awful, vile weeb coomer? There you go. All three things. Perfect. Sorted. Job's a good one. Job's good. I'm going to be fucking stabbed in the street by some Genshin lunatic for that. But no, yeah. I think a lot of it comes down to that's where World of Warcraft is like, it's fighting in this war against these like giants of video game people who have figured out motivation. WoW needs to kind of get in there. And obviously happiness isn't just chemicals, right? Fucking...
He says
Yeah.
with a fleeting hope.
Yeah, like obviously, but it is fundamentally, that's where video games are heading, where it's like, how do you get the lowest common denominator to play your game for longest? And the answer is making their brain go, wee! Woo! Yippee! Yatta! Etc.
Yep.
So like you keep doing that, and that's where video games are. And World of Warcraft had the made your brain go wee, but also it made your soul unhappy because you were forcefully grinding out Torghast. It made you unhappy, but it made your brain go yeah.
Well,
so
that's
they need
just
to
that
make you
weird
happy
thing.
and your brain go yeah. That's the holy grail.
If you fell into Torghast of your own volition, it's like, there you go, boys, job done.
Deadly, unreal.
Happy,
class.
happy, all good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, it is. It is the good old Bing Bing Wahoo. Oh, it's just sorted out ages ago.
It is as
Yeah.
Super Mario said in whatever the fucking year he was born.
Oh, yep.